been watching some old movies of late and have been discovering that some of them are actually quite good. So a lot of these movies were made in the 50s and the 60s, and they're like old Bollywood movies. I've been watching a few of them. Most of the ones I've seen so far have been Dev Anand movies. I watched Dono about 2 weeks ago. And maybe a week or so ago I watched Bazi. Watched Gambler also the last 2 or 3 weeks. Just a couple of days ago watched Guru Dutt's Mr. and Mrs. 55. And I thought I'd review some of these movies for your listening pleasure. Today I'll go ahead and review Hum Dono. This was the first movie that I wanted to review quite a while back, about 2 weeks back when I first saw it. But it's taken me a little while to get to it. But yeah, it's the reason I wanted to review it because it has kind of some plot points struck me as like being quite, unique. Like you don't see it every day these days. So the movie Hum Dono was released in 1961. It was a huge hit. Stars screen icon Dev Anand in a double role. And we also have Sadhana and Nanda as his two leading ladies in the movie. The movie starts out it's like a song, picturized on Dev Anand and Sadhana. And like at the end of the song we find out, they're like two, like lovers, and Dev Anand's about to propose to Sadhana. Well, he's about to go to her father and ask for her hand in marriage. But we also find out that Sadhana is the daughter of a rich father. Not the spoiled daughter of a rich father, as we'll soon find out, but the daughter of a rich father. And Dev Anand is unemployed and comes from a poor background. So this is kind of like a filmy storyline, kind of unrealistic, but I guess these are the stories that, sold back in the day, and maybe even now. No one ever said, I guess, that films are supposed to be grounded in reality. They're supposed to be like escape from reality, kind of like a fantasy world, a what if version of our lives, I guess. So in this what if version of reality, it's like, the girl isn't bothered at all by the fact that, she's like super rich and he barely has a penny to his name. And so they, at the end of the song, they decide that, yep, come tomorrow, Dev Anand. What was his name in the movie? Here, I have to do a quick search to figure out what his name was in the movie. Only watched it 2 weeks ago, but I've forgotten what his name was. Anand. Okay. His name was Anand in the movie. Okay. So, Anand pretty much promises to, come to her house tomorrow, come to Sadhana's house tomorrow and ask for her hand in marriage from her father. And so Sadhana goes back home and, lets her dad know that, to expect a visit from a prospective suitor next day. And so her father is, a little skeptical about this suitor. He's, like I said, a rich businessman, and he's wondering, what kind of loafer, what kind of no good, gold digger he's gonna come, ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. So the next day comes along, and Dev Anand shows up. He's a little late, so this rubs Sadhana's father the wrong way. It's like, how can he be late for such an important thing? And so Dev Anand shows up and lets him know that he was late because he had gone to interview for a job, but he left the interview midway through because he had this other appointment, and so he's come to ask for Sadhana's hand in marriage, and in doing so, he's let her father know that he doesn't have a job, is pretty poor, and all this and all that, which of course doesn't strike her father too favorably. So he, kind of insults Dev Anand. He's like, I'm so rich, you're so poor, my daughter probably, I probably spent more on my daughter's last birthday party than you've ever seen in your life. Stuff like that, So of course, Dev Anand, of course, is the hero in the movie, so he has some self-pride and stuff. And so, feels insulted, but I think he also kind of feels that there is some truth to Sadhana's father's words. So he kind of just walks out of the meeting. When he walks out, Sadhana's father's back is turned to him. But so Sadhana's father doesn't even know that Dev Anand has left the house. Of course, Sadhana is nowhere to be seen here because this is a conversation between dad and prospective suitor of his daughter's hand. So Dev Anand walks out. Sadhana's father continues his monologue for a while in the presence of no one but himself, and then is suddenly struck by remorse and guilt and whatever. And it's like, as long as you promise to keep my daughter happy, as long as my daughter's happiness is bound in you, I'm willing to accept you as my son-in-law and all that. It's like I said, it's a very filmy story. So he turns around, but he finds that Anand's already left. Anand's already gone. So short while later, Sadhana shows up and it's like, hey, what happened? And he's like, I don't know. I may have insulted him, and he may have, walked away in a huff of pride. So at this point, father and daughter are upset. So Dev Anand is also upset. So, next we, join the movie as Dev Anand's walking down a street disconsolate, wounded pride and everything. Then he sees a sign. So this movie was apparently set, even though it was released in 1961, in the beginning they tell us that it's set during the time of the Second World War. So apparently there's a recruitment campaign going on, and so he sees a sign which basically says, hey, Uncle Sam needs you, but substitute Indian Army for Uncle Sam. So Dev Anand decides to, enlist in the army. It is a job, right? So, he's upset at, at the fact that, he doesn't even have a job. So, how can he go ask for a girl's hand in marriage? So, he joins the army and he thinks, this way I'll, move ahead in life and, make a name for myself. And he enlists in the army, and then he, goes home to pack his bags, and there we find that he lives with his mother in like a small cottage, pretty poor part of town, and looks like his father has passed away, and it's just mother and son living together in old cottage, or like an old house that you'd have seen back in the day in India, in 1945, 1960, whatever. So of course his mom is like really upset when she finds out that her son has joined the army. She's like, you'll never return alive, I will never see you alive. If you leave today, if you go and join the army, if you leave today, I will never see you alive again. But of course, Dev Anand, doesn't really, give much credence to her words. He's like, God will protect me. No need to worry. God will protect me. I will return. Hale and hearty, safe and sound one day, you will see, and I'll return not this, penniless loafer, not this useless guy who doesn't even have a job, but I'll return as an Indian Army officer, someone you can be proud of. And so he packs his bag and leaves, and leaves his mother weeping and wailing. And now in the next unbelievable twist, and now in the next plot point. This was the plot point that really struck me as unique. This is the plot point that made me kind of want to review the movie. So next, what happens is that Sadhana comes to Dev Anand's house and talks to his mother, because obviously by now Dev Anand has already left. She obviously came to talk to Dev Anand and find out what happened in his interview with her father, and try to make amends for it, possibly try to apologize for her father's behavior or whatever. But by the time she gets there, Dev Anand's already left, and she finds his mother, and initially her mother's really upset at her. She's like, "Oh, you're the witch," on whose account my son left me and joined the army. And she's like really upset at Sadhana and really lets her have it. But after a while, she calms down and apologizes. And Sadhana, what she does is she leaves her house, her big house of a rich father, and moves in with Dev Anand's mother and begins to live in his small cottage. She's like, "I'm going to be your future daughter-in-law. When Dev Anand returns, we'll get married. So this is going to be my house in the future. So I'm just going to make it my house from today onwards itself. I'm going to leave my rich, comfortable house, and I'm going to come live with you as your daughter-in-law," pretty much. So this was the unbelievable twist in the movie. So just imagine. Can you imagine like a rich girl leaving her comfortable house and going to live in, some cottage, some small cottage, when a prospective suitor or to-be husband isn't even there. She just goes and lives with who she thinks will be her future mother-in-law, and she's like, "Okay, I'm gonna live with you. I'm gonna help you in the daily work of the house." So, an unbelievable twist, but there you have it. It is well done. It is well made. When I say it, it sounds pretty awful, pretty unbelievable, pretty corny. But the movie is pretty well made and well done. And you go along with it. You're swept away in this fairy tale land. So anyway, so now we leave India and we go to Burma, where the war is raging on. So Dev Anand has done well. He's been promoted to the rank of captain. So now he's Captain Anand in the Indian Army. The war is raging on in Burma. That's where he is deployed. And one day he finds a purse. So in the purse there's the name of the person to it belongs. So he goes to return the purse. And there he finds his lookalike. The purse belongs to Major Manohar Verma, I believe. Yep, Major Manohar Verma, who happens to be a lookalike of Captain Anand. The only difference is that he has a mustache, he's a major, and his mannerisms are also different. I guess, when they made the movie, they decided that, okay, if we're going to have a double role, we have to make each character distinct. So, the first Dev Anand we encounter, Captain Anand, so to speak, the lover boy of this movie, is your probably your typical Indian youth of the 1950s, 1960s, 1940s, with the typical mannerisms, the usual mannerisms of Indian youth. But Major Verma, to make him different, they give him a Hercule Poirot mustache, and they also give him English gentleman mannerisms. I guess back in those days, India had just gained its freedom, colonial English influence was probably strong. So they give him like the mannerisms of an English gentleman, which are pretty ridiculous, when you look at it now. But, in those days, I guess anything flew. And, like I've said a million times, it is a movie and you go along with it in this fairy tale land. So, it does look quite foolish when you see Dev Anand going like 6 gram or blah, 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 like those English expressions, English gentleman officer expressions coming from him. Don't look natural, but, I guess they needed to make the two characters different, and this is the path they chose. So anyway, Captain Anand and Major Verma meet, and, soon they become best of friends, drinking buddies and best of friends. They spend the whole night drinking and telling each other about their, respective stories. Major Verma tells Dev Anand, Captain Anand, about, his situation at home. Like how, he lives with his, like how he left his mother and his wife back home, how he used to live with his mother and wife in this, big house, how he used to go play tennis in his club, and, how he used to joke around and this and that. But he kind of gives Dev Anand a good description of his family life back home. Captain Anand, good description of his family life back home. And so the war progresses, Dev Anand, Captain Anand, Major Verma, they're in it together, and one day time comes for like a big decisive battle, and, they're both involved in it, and of course something big's gonna happen here. So what happens is that Major Verma, the second character that Dev Anand is playing in this movie, he gets injured and left behind, and he kind of holds ground, to let the rest of his crew regiment leave or whatever for safer terrain. But he's like, since I'm already injured, I'll stay here and hold the ground, and you guys leave. And he also asks, Captain Anand to kind of look after his family back home, because he's not too hopeful of surviving. So Captain Anand and the rest of the regiment eventually leave Major Verma to his fate. Eventually, Major Verma is declared missing. And a lot of people just take it for granted that he died. Captain Anand definitely thinks he's missing, presumed dead. And for his heroics in the war, Captain Anand gets promoted and he becomes Major Anand. Then he also gets a holiday, a short leave to go back home to India. And so now the story is going to take some more plot twists and turns. So, Dev Anand, now Major Anand, returns home to go see his mother. And what does he find when he goes home? He finds Sadhana living there. And so he's like, oh, you heard of me returning, so you came to visit me. By now you must be married and all, right? So tell me about, your life, what you've been doing in my absence. And Sadhana lets him know that, she in fact is not married, and that she's been living here with his mother all the time, and she's still faithfully devoted to him. So of course this pleases Dev Anand no end, and then he inquires about his mother, and here he gets the bad news. His mother has passed away in his absence. She has died of grief. So her words did come prophetic. Like if you remember, when Dev Anand initially enlisted for the army and left, she had told him that if he left, she would never see him alive again. And she was right. Because by the time Dev Anand returns, she has already passed away. So here's the first heavy twist, heavy-hearted, twist in the plot. So obviously Dev Anand is devastated, now Major Anand is devastated. And suddenly he remembers, Major Verma and his family. So he decides to, go tell his family, Major Verma's mother and wife about Major Verma's fate. Now, over there in Major Verma's house, Major Verma's mother has already received a letter from the army saying that her son is missing in action. So she's grieving for him. Nanda, who happens to be Major Verma's wife, is also, grieving and in ill health by now. And when Dev Anand reaches their house to give them, the bad news in person about Major Verma's fate, they both mistake him for Major Verma, because remember, they are lookalikes. So Major Verma's mother mistakes Major Anand for Major Verma, and so does Major Verma's wife. They're just so, relieved to find him alive that they just take him as their son, as her husband. And in the confusion, Major Anand doesn't really have the heart to, correct them of their mistake. When Major Verma's mother first takes him as her son, he too takes her as his mother because he's grieving for his own mother who had passed away in his absence. And then he finds out that Major Verma's wife is ailing and that, another shock might be too much for a system. He finds that out from her doctor. And her doctor advises him to keep up the facade, to keep up the charade, and to not let her know that, her husband has passed away, and to, just let her keep living in this mistaken belief that her husband is in fact, right in front of her. And so Dev Anand, Major Anand, decides to go along with this for the sake of her health. And so now he spends his days over there with Major Verma's families, and when he can, he heads back to his own home, where Sadhana is obviously distraught at his behavior. She's like, hey, why isn't he spending more time with me? Why hasn't he asked me to marry him or whatever? But he's like, but Dev Anand, the Major Anand, is like so, just overwhelmed with the situation that he, can't even think of proposing to Sadhana right now. It's just like, how do I, relieve Major Verma's mother and wife of their, mistaken assumptions without, dealing a fatal blow to one or both of them who might just die of grief if they find out that their son or their husband has passed away. So he continues leading this double life, obviously he doesn't sleep with Major Verma's wife, he just claims PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, has left him in no state to, perform his husbandly duties, even though she's like, kind of insisting that he does. But of course he does not. Matters are coming to a head. So obviously, if you know anything about movies, then you know that someone is about to return. Someone is going to come back now. And so that certain someone does come back. Because now we're in quite a quandary. Like, if you're Major Anand, if by now you even tell the truth to Nanda, Major Verma's wife, and his mother, then society will kind of take a dim view of the whole situation. They'll be like, hey, this guy lived in that house as Major Verma for all these weeks, so, he's like pretty certain that society will take it for granted that, he had been bedding Major Verma's wife the whole time, and so this will leave her in disgrace and in a pretty tough spot. So it's like, even by now, even if I tell the truth, I'm kind of screwed. And over there, Sadhana's also upset with him because, one time she went to a temple and she saw, Major Anand with Nanda there, and, got the wrong idea that, he's left her for some other woman. And so Sadhana is now upset, and she's like, oh, I've acted like a complete fool. I'm gonna leave your house and move back in with my rich father. And so Dev Anand, his whole world is falling apart. On one hand, Sadhana, the girl he loves, is about to, leave him. He's some misunderstanding. And on the other hand, he doesn't know whether or not to tell, Nanda and, Major Verma's mother the truth. And he's like, even if I tell them the truth, by now I've probably just made matters worse. So at this crucial juncture, obviously, that someone has to return, and someone does return. Major Verma returns, the second role that Dev Anand is playing in this movie. So he returns, but by now he's lost one of his legs. And he returns and he's heading back home. On his way back home, he meets some old acquaintance who tells him that this other guy, this imposter, has been living in his house pretending to be him all along. And so this infuriates Major Verma, and he decides to kill Major Anand. He's like, oh, this rotten guy, I befriended him in the army even though he was below me in rank, told him all about my family situation back home. And instead of, taking care of my mother and my wife like a friend of mine, he's like living in my house like he owns the whole thing. He must have been taken over by greed, avarice, lust, all these things go through his head. So he makes up his mind to put an end to Major Anand. So when one fine day when Major Anand leaves, Major Verma's house, Major Verma follows him, and the pistol in hand, follows him to some dark alley, and then shoots at him. But luckily his aim is off, and so he misses, and then a fight ensues, and then both Major Anand and Major Verma become aware of each other, and Major Verma is so upset at Major Anand, but then Major Anand, then explains the situation. He's like, no, all this time, I've been living there as your friend. I never even touched your wife. I've been claiming PTSD the whole time to stay, away from those types of activities. And he's also like, hey, your wife still loves you this whole time, This whole time she's been complaining that even though I'm back in body, I'm not back in spirit, that, my eyes lack the twinkle that they used to have. She's still missing you. She's still yearning for you. But now Major Verma, who doesn't have one of his legs, is suddenly, consumed by self-doubts and an inferiority complex. And he's like, you know what? I was wrong. Go ahead and take my wife as your own. This charade, this facade, whatever, let's make it permanent. You take over my life. I'll leave and go somewhere else. But of course, Dev Anand, Major Anand, refuses to do so, and he's like, come to this temple tomorrow and I'll prove that your wife still loves you, regardless of what shape you're in. And so now we come to the climax of the movie. Both the Dev Anands, Major Verma and Major Anand, will be coming to this temple. Major Verma will be hidden. Major Anand brings Nanda, and he also asks Sadhana to come to this temple. And so Sadhana and Major Verma are hidden, and Major Anand and Nanda have a conversation. Major Anand's like, Nanda to Major Anand, the conversation goes. Nanda is like, hey, this whole time you've been back, you haven't really acted like my husband. I think you're in love with this other girl, Sadhana. Just leave me for her. I think this way we'll both be happier, and I'll live with the past memories of you. And so hearing this, Dev Anand is, Captain Anand is like, you never really loved me anyway. If I had only one leg, would you love me? And so Nanda is like, of course, I would love you even if you had one leg, but only if you were the old you, not this new you who is so distant, so far away, even when close. And so, at this point, Major Verma reveals herself to Nanda, and they both hug and kiss and walk happily away. And meanwhile, Sadhana also finds out, so that's why, Anand was telling the truth all along, that he still loves me. He was only, putting up this facade so that, this other girl would, have something to live for, and, to keep her spirits up. And so we have the happy ending. So Sadhana and Anand can now get married and live happily ever after. And Major Verma and Nanda, can also continue their, married life merrily, ever after, and so on and so forth. And so that was the movie Dono. I don't know if I did justice to the movie in this review, but it's actually a pretty fun movie. I did enjoy it. I did like it. I think it's a pretty good movie. It is kind of like a fantasy fairy tale kind of movie, but made in the 1960s, and it has kind of simplicity to it. I think it's better than the movies that we see these days. The movies these days, I don't know what to say about them. They're just so awful, so rotten, so unwatchable. There's just a beauty and a simplicity about some well-made movies in the 1960s, and Dono is definitely one of them, despite some far-fetched, or probably because of some far-fetched story elements. So it gets 2 thumbs up from me, and thank you to all of you for staying with me, for listening to this long preview. Thank you. Review. Thank you.